Right, welcome back, and let me again welcome our guest, Dr. Cherif AMIR, Professor of Political Science. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
If I may start with President Fattah al-Sisi's participation in the G20 this year upon the invitation of the Japanese Prime Minister, and how significant it is for Egypt and for Egypt as the African Union chairperson.
Well, the first element is that Egypt is well and alive and present everywhere. We have seen President Sisi last week in the Balkans and in Belarus and in Romania. A few days later, we are present in Japan. It's very obvious that we are gaining again our position not only in Africa and the Middle East, but in the world. As you just mentioned, we are the head of the African Union now, and Africa is witnessing a new chapter in its history. I think it's a bright one because we are heading towards technology, we are heading towards cooperation with the outside world, I mean by Africa. So I think that when the head of the African Union, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, goes to Japan, he bears all the hopes of the continent to the outside world. That's not only Europe, but also Japan, the United States, and all of Asia. So this kind of forum or meeting is something very, very positive, not only for Egypt, but for Africa and the Middle East, because we know that we are witnessing turmoil in several things, whether in Africa or in the Middle East. We hear every day, unfortunately, rumors about war with Iran, terrorism, uprisings in some countries. But these are the challenges that Egypt is carrying now, that we are a Middle Eastern country, an Arab country, an African country, and we are taking the challenge to the outside world. We're saying that we will not hesitate to offer our credentials to the world and say, come and invest in Egypt, come and invest in Africa, let's work together. The G20, there is also the European Union, and the European Union is suffering now from social and economic problems, whether in France. Italy, for example, is suffering from the refugees problem. So I think that the fact that what we witnessed in Africa in the late decades, the young people are hoping to go and live in Europe. Well, the gates of Europe are being closed now. So there is no other way except development inside Africa, inside the continent, and development inside our own countries. This is exactly what President al-Sisi said in all the conferences with the youth in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Aswan, when he said to the young people, and it was very, very accurate to address this to the young people when he said to them, it is your duty to build your own countries, because no one will help you to do it. You will do it by yourselves. We are witnessing this in Egypt, and we hope that this message would be a concrete work on the ground in Africa during the presidency of Egypt.
And from this perspective exactly, and Egypt is attending the G20 itself this year has focused on trade, digital economy, innovation, and that, of course, beside the sidelines meeting that would be taking place, because G20 gather some of the very important world powers and important economies. If we speak about the G20, trade, digital economy, innovation, which is exactly what Africa needs at this particular time we're speaking about. How far do you think that Egypt will be able to raise priorities of Africa and challenges, particularly of what concerns economy-wise? How would Egypt promote Africa?
First of all, geographically, we are the hub, the relationship between Africa, Europe, and Asia, and the Arab world. So geographically, we have this role, and we had it several years ago, since the late 19th century, and when Egypt started its own development. So I think that this is continuously something that Egypt has to ensure. We have started in Egypt here the digital government. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli got the instructions of President Sisi from the Thursday he started his mandate as Prime Minister. President Sisi gave him the instructions that we have to work very quickly by the end of 2020, that we will have a digital government, that we will have everything that is being coordinated through one network here in Egypt. This is not only benefit for Egypt, it will be a benefit also for Africa, because the same thing Egypt proposed to the African nations. Let's not forget that when you have the presidency of an organization like the African Union, you have to present some innovation, you have to present some projects that's not only about security and conflicts, it's also about development. We started working with our counterparts and brothers in Africa about this question, that we have to have a network of cooperation. We started this in the legal domain. We will start it now in this domain, also the economy. Concerning the technology and trade, well, we know that the IMF President Christine Lagarde, when she came here to Egypt several times, she ensured that we have to start in Egypt the digital development in the economy. So Egypt, answering your question, is promoting this by giving itself...
I guess that Egypt started way before the what Mrs. Christine Lagarde said when she came to Egypt. We spoke, I mean, here instructions were given even before that to start our coping with sophisticated technology and the digital, because we are within the digital era.
We speeded the actions because some sectors were not really according, because look, the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has his own character of carrying a plan according to timing. So he has always precise timing, you know, always like that. We see it on the media. And when he gives a date, he gives a date. That's it. And he has his word.
They give him a date and he takes it too.
Yeah. Yes, and usually...
And it's, usually it is done.
Yes, because he knows what he's saying.
Yes.
So he studies very carefully the file, and he knows when he gives the date how it will be done. So I think that some sectors were reluctant, and he gave the order to speed up. And this is
the process, very much indeed. The G20 in itself is a chance for world leaders to meet.
Yes.
And exchange views and visions regarding different files. How far do you think that this year the G20 comes at a very critical time when world leaders really need to meet to understand exactly what are they going through, what are the threats that are really imposed there, and how about some of the very much awaited encounters, such as, for instance, the US-China? Please.
Well, the trade war between US and China, it will take long time to be solved, because both of them are giants now, and we know that the Chinese company Huawei was severely hit by the Americans lately. So I think that this meeting could ease the tensions in some way, not really resolve the problems, but ease the tensions. And I think that the Japanese, they have an important role in this kind of meetings, because they are, we have seen Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he went to Iran lately also.
Yes.
And he met the supreme leader of the Iranian Revolution, Ayatollah Khamenei. And then when he left, there was some escalation in the Strait of Hormuz. So this is again a role for Japan there, is that there is a mediation in every sector, whether the conflict between the US and China or the US and Iran. And I think that the fact that...
Iran is not invited.
No. Iran is not invited because it's considered as a rogue state by several countries. Let's not forget that they left by their own initiative, and that's what President Vladimir Putin told them when they left the nuclear agreement with the European Union, Russia, and China. He said, when someone will blame, you will be blamed because you have given the first blow. So they are now in a very, very bad situation, and international community, as they left the agreement, the nuclear agreement. So they're not invited. Turkey is not invited, I think. Yes.
I don't think there was a reason. Anyway, if we come back yes, to the G20 and the Egyptian participation, and we are speaking about the participation of President Fattah al-Sisi, yes, upon the invitation of the Japanese, yes, Prime Minister. I think that Egypt's diplomacy has always had its own vision and character in how it sees world problems and how it expresses wisdom or a more wise vision towards incidents. How far do you think that this will be delivered during that participation?
Look, Egypt has a new way of diplomacy now since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi became president when he was democratically elected in 2014. It was that Egypt has to build bridges with every continent and with every country, whatever the size of this country. Meaning, for example, the first contacts between Egypt and a country like Vietnam was at the time of President Sisi. Well, it's not a giant, economic giant in Asia, but we worked with this country. Visits to Bulgaria, visits to Belarus, and also he was the first Egyptian president to visit Rwanda, where the genocide took place in the 1990s. So it's very obvious that Egypt now is not only focusing at building excellent relations with the Western world and Russia, but it's also building relations, concrete relations, with countries who are eager for development and finding a middle way between superpowers. So I think that we are drawing the figure of Egypt's diplomacy is to have stable relationship with every country in every continent. This is a great job that was done also by Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. He visited Japan lately also. So it's very important to understand that Egypt's diplomacy under President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi now is very clear that we will have a role of mediation in every conflict, whether the Libyan conflict, whether the Sudanese conflict, whether the Israeli-Arab conflict. We are present everywhere. We have a role of mediation. We are a regional power. Well, some countries didn't wish us the recovery since 2011. Well, we disappointed them, fortunately, and we came back. And I think that we have more to do under the presidency of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who is a man of the clear word. We never blackmailed any of the European countries concerning fighting terrorism, fighting illegal immigration. We are starting to work on our infrastructure. We invited Japan, China,
let's say that
and
our
Russia.
Diplomacy is very much built on integrity.
Yes, of course.
And transparency, and we are so clear in showing our vision. If we speak about economy, and this G20 is built on economy, Usually economy was always a reflection, or it reflects highly on the political and other aspects. From your point of view, do you think that economic and development and discussing means of bridging gaps, particularly in economy, would really reflect on other files? But when we speak about terrorism, when we speak about political differences, when we speak about aspects of how to narrow gaps between some of the countries, can we really say that this G20, while discussing economy, would be also tackling such important files?
Of course, because look, for example, when the escalation took place in the Strait of Hormuz, we had the problem of the oil and the oil prices.
Definitely.
Which is of course economy. When we started investing in our oil fields, and then Turkey started harassing Cyprus, and the Mediterranean, the gas fields also, the gas prices drop, of course. So it's all geopolitics is related to economy in this kind of relationship. But still, let's say that the superpowers are eager not to make things escalate, because economies everywhere in the world are not doing really good. Something has to be done by stabilizing the situation and calming it, whether in the Gulf or in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's why I think that the G20 could be a kind of overture for the leaders to talk. I don't know if President Putin would meet his counterpart, President Trump, or not. We don't know. Well, President Trump is full of surprises in these cases. But I think that this kind of meeting, if it takes place, it will help us understand lots of things. Because yesterday, the trilateral security meeting in Israel between Russia, the United States, and Israel, the representative of Russia, he said, we would not let the escalation take place in this region because we have economic interests, as he said, and we have geopolitical interests. So we won't permit the escalation with Iran to take place as the United States wants. So I think that
as the United States want? Does really the United States want an escalation, or it's just...
escalation does not mean war. Escalation does not mean war. It could be 2 steps from war, but it's not, still, it's not war. It's very different. Escalation is something that could trigger tensions. Some, like the drone, for example, that was hit by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, a U.S. drone. Well, there was no U.S. action, and President...
No, there was. Mr. Trump, he declared some new sanctions on Iranian figures, and yes, indeed, but it was unmanned drone, and this is very much disputed, as Iran showed a map that it was on the territories of Iran, and the U.S. side denied this issue, and it is. But at the end of the day, we're speaking about an escalation of words.
Escalation of what?
Of words.
Yes, escalation concerning the fate of the Strait of Hormuz, the fate of the conflict in Yemen. It's like this is another way of pressuring. Look, when this took place, the second day, the next day, there was Abha in Saudi Arabia that was hit. An airport in Saudi Arabia was hit.
The Abha airport.
Yes, and,
yes, indeed.
And the infiltration of some Houthi fighters is taking place, didn't stop. So we see that it's like a chess game. There some moves are being done. The Americans are, as President Trump said it, he is counting on his own interest for his country. So some countries in this region has to be aware of this huge game. I think that the G20 would be an excellent meeting for all these leaders to talk about, well, what's next.
And I think Egypt has a lot to say about that.
Of course.
Before we continue on with our discussion, here is another report, and the Prime Minister reviews Egypt's economic indicators in Arab-German Forum. Let's watch the report and we'll come back for discussion.
تحية تقدير واحترام لبطل حقيقي. البطل ده هو مصر وشعبها. الحكاية مش حكاية لا حكومة ولا قيادة، ده حكاية كل مواطن في مصر. أكرمت مصر وشرفت مصر وعزيت مصر، انتم قتلتم. فالشرف كل الشرف والكرامة كل الكرامة والفضل كل الفضل لله سبحانه وتعالى، ثم ليكم انتم. شرفتوني واكرمتموني وعزتوني ورفعت راسي قدام الدنيا كلها باللي انتم عملتوه. والله 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 لن يستطيع اي رئيس يقف مكاني هنا انه يقدر يعمل حاجه بدونكم. لن يستطيع. قصه وطن يتحدث عن نفسه، شعب أراد الحياة فاستجاب له القدر.
The Arab-German Business Forum kicked off on Wednesday in Berlin with the participation of Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, who delivered a speech to review the economic indicators of Egypt. The importance of Egypt's participation in this year's forum is that it is the guest of honor, and so the Egyptian participation represents an excellent opportunity to promote the investment opportunities that Egypt possesses. The forum is attended by about 600 businessmen from both the Arab and German sides. It is an important economic and investment forum for cooperation and economic and trade partnerships. Egypt signed 7 cooperation agreements with Germany. Meanwhile, Egypt and Germany agreed to start preparing a framework of cooperation agreement between the Egyptian and German railways. Prime Minister Madbouli highlighted that Egypt is on track to achieve a surplus of 2% of gross domestic product in the fiscal year 2018-2019. Premier Madbouli said during his speech at the Arab-German Business Forum that foreign reserves have recovered to exceed pre-2011 levels, reaching a record level of $44.3 billion by the end of May 2019, compared to $14.9 billion in June 2013. The Prime Minister stated that the objectives of the economic reform program launched in 2016 have borne fruit, referring to Egypt's growth rate of 5.6% in 2018-2019, which makes Egypt one of the strongest and highest growth rates in the region among emerging economies. He pointed out that Egypt's participation as a guest of honor of the forum this year reflects the appreciation and confidence of the Arab and German sides for Egypt's success in the past few years. Madbouli stressed that Egypt considers Germany as one of the major partners in the economic development efforts, not only in Europe but globally.